you were involved in the Cohen bid.
Yep.
I'm curious why you think, that area needs to be transformed as a Mets fan who's been there.
I mean, so across from center field are these chop shops that literally, it's like being in a third world country. Like they're not even hooked up for running water. So the idea that that's in New York City is crazy.
Welcome to the Predictive Podcast. I'm here with Bradley Tusk, who previously served as former Mayor Bloomberg's campaign manager, communications director for Senator Chuck Schumer, an early advisor with Uber, and is the founder and CEO of Tusk Ventures. Your most recent book, Vote with Your Phone, Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy, introduced a complete and well-thought-out way to expand voting participation. Can you give the listeners just a quick pitch of mobile voting?
Thank you for the chance to do it. So, look, we live in a highly dysfunctional, highly polarized world right now. And the reason is simply that because of gerrymandering, over 90% of elections are decided in the primaries, and primary turnout is typically about 10%. And those voters tend to be the ideological extremes or special interests. And if politicians do what politicians do, which is stay in office at all costs, no matter what, then they represent whoever is going to vote in their next election and move money and votes in their next election. And if that means the far right, the far left, or whatever special interest, that's what they will do. Mm-hmm. But if turnout were, say, 40% in primaries instead of 10, they'll represent much more of the mainstream, not because they care any more or less about the outcomes, but simply because they want to stay in office. And we all have a supercomputer in our pockets. Mm-hmm. And so we spent at the Mobile Voting Project, which is a philanthropic effort, the last 5 years building mobile voting technology that is end-to-end encrypted and end-to-end verifiable and has biometric screening and multi-factor authentication, lots of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it's free. We've put it up on GitHub. Anyone in the world, any government in the world can just download it and use it. Very cool. And now we are running legislation in different states that would actually allow people to start voting on their phones. As you can imagine, the status quo doesn't necessarily want there to be a lot of change.
The conversation isn't there right now.
No, but we're trying. And if you want to learn more, if you go to mobilevoting.org, there's tons of info on there.
Yeah, and I'm curious, you talk about how it will increase political participation and maybe capture the center of the political spectrum. But Gen Z, who's been called, the most progressive generation ever, is probably going to be the most involved in mobile voting, if that were the case.
Yeah, I mean, they'll be, if we win, it's because we built and mobilized a giant national grassroots movement, right? And if you look at every major right in American history that's ever been won, women's right to vote, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, same-sex marriage, whatever it is, it happened not because the status quo wanted it. Status quo never wants change. Mm-hmm. That's why there's a status quo. But if enough people stand up loud enough and long enough and they demand their rights, eventually the status quo does give in. And that's what we have to do here. And that's going to be led by Gen Z.
And do you think making Election Day a national holiday might be an easier way to increase turnout?
I mean, it might be easier. I don't think it'll succeed because the problem is our presidential election gets pretty good turnout, about 66%, but everything else is pretty abysmal. Mm-hmm. And if it's a holiday, the question is, are people then going to sort of interrupt their holiday to go vote in the state Senate primary? No. And keep in mind, because of gerrymandering, if you're going to do Election Day as a holiday, it needs to be the day of the primary, not the day of the general election in November.
Yeah.
And then even then, people just don't care enough. They're not engaged enough to go meaningfully out of their way to vote in most elections. Mm-hmm. And yet most elections, especially at the municipal level, are the ones that really impact our lives. And so, I think that any solution that requires people to go somewhere can't succeed at scale, but a solution where we are taking advantage of the device that we all have an intimate relationship with already can.
And you also talk about how mobile voting isn't a complete solution. You acknowledge term limits might also be a good reform to consider.
Yeah.
Rahm Emanuel just announced his proposal for a mandatory retirement age of 75. Do you support that?
I haven't, Rahm's a very smart guy. I worked with him a lot when he was a congressman from Chicago and I was deputy governor of Illinois. Haven't taken a look at it specifically. Is his idea to try to get people to work longer to delay the onset of Social Security and Medicare, or is his idea?
No, it's more of a replacement for term limits. retirements. So instead of
get politicians to retire.
yes,
Not
government official politicians to retire.
Yeah, absolutely. I support that. I also support allowing 16-year-olds to vote, simply because we have had a public policy in this country for decades and decades that shifts wealth from the young to the old and takes all kinds of current benefits in terms of spending and tax cuts, and bestows them upon people like me who are 52, and just puts all of the debt on my kids. That is in no way sustainable. So yes.
And moving on to New York, because if your resume tells us anything, you know New York very well.
Try to.
So I'm curious, what do you expect from the new mayor, Mayor Mamdani, in his first term, and what kind of challenges might you face in re-election?
So far, I'll say it's better than I expected, or not as bad as I feared.
A month
in.
Right?
Now,
not even.
The reality is, and I've had this conversation with him, for all of his ideological fervor and his great use of short form video and everything else, it's an operational job, right? There's this great story that during the 1970s, and the Vietnam War was happening, John Lindsay was the mayor of New York City. And I think Lindsay was like a Mamdani of his era, right? Ran for president, very charismatic, very telegenic, all of these things. And there's some sort of like national Democratic dinner, and Lindsay and the original Mayor Daley were sitting at the table together with a group of people, and Lindsay's droning on about his opposition to the Vietnam War. And finally, Daley leans over to him and says, "Your job is to pick up the trash." And I think that's still the case, right? And so if Mamdani focuses on the operational aspect of the job and does them well, he will be successful. It's pretty simple. If the city feels clean, safe, and well run, the New Yorkers are happy, people of any city are happy, and the mayor gets reelected. And if it doesn't, it is a real challenge. So far, most of the operational appointments that have been made, and that they haven't all been made yet, have been pretty solid. And that's what matters most. And I think for Zoran, there's going to be sort of two different things he has to do when it comes to the operational part of the job. One he's done, which is, get good people, and then he has to let them do their jobs. And I suspect he'll do that. The second is there are political choices that come into play, like the budget, right? So New York City is looking at as much as a $12 billion budget deficit. The more that you cut operational services, the more the city really suffers. And I don't think you can afford it. You have to find the money in other areas. Or, for example, there are real quality of life harms that New Yorkers hate that do require for him, if you're someone from the far left, some political courage. So, for example, in the last year, they collected data on this, which was 2022, so it's a couple years old, but 327 people committed over 30% of the shoplifting in New York City. They were arrested over 6,600 times. The far left believes that those people are the victims of institutional racism and therefore should never go to jail for it. But the rest of us have to now, if we want a tube of toothpaste at CVS, press a button and wait for someone to come and unlock the case. And you know what I do? I don't do that. I order it on Amazon. So effectively, the refusal to take people who are serial shoplifters and prosecute them and put them in jail causes lots of small businesses to go out of business and lots of regular New Yorkers to lose their jobs. It takes a little bit of political courage in his community to say, no, we're going to enforce the law here, right? So there's a lot of things like that where there are policy choices that if he has some political courage, he can be successful, but that will be the test.
Yeah. And what do you grade him on the most recent snowstorm?
Pretty,
A.
I think good. I mean, obviously there are some deaths and tragically, if you have a snowstorm of 22 inches in a city, like this, some people are going to suffer from it. If it turns out that, the city was highly negligent and responsible for those deaths in some way, that's a problem. Although even then, the guy's been in office for a month. But at least in terms of, do the streets seem pretty clear? Yes.
Pretty quickly.
Amazingly, my daughter is, as we speak, taking her road test, which is sort of crazy, right?
Best time, huh?
She and I were debating it this morning. There's one of two things that's going to happen. Either she's going to fail miserably, or they're going to be like, the curb's going to be like, well, that's impossible.
Yeah.
Right? So actually, I am such a terrible driver that I'm really eager for my kids to learn how to drive.
That's a true
because
New Yorker
I don't
right
want
there.
to be behind the wheel. No one benefits if I'm behind the wheel, but because they're New Yorkers, she's 19 and first learning now because New York City kids don't see the need to learn how to drive in the first place.
No, I don't get in the passenger seat with my New York City friends. That's for sure.
Right, I can imagine.
And are you pro or anti snow day or remote learning? Which side do you follow?
Snow day. My son had a snow day. Also, as someone who was a parent during COVID, remote school was a disaster.
Yeah.
Right. Now, I understand that if New York City probably, in retrospect, should not have closed the schools to begin with. Mm-hmm. But let's say you make that determination, fine, because there will be another pandemic at some point. Sadly, probably a lot sooner than 100-year increments.
Right.
If it's just one day, just let the kids have the day off.
Yeah.
Like the remote learning thing, it doesn't work.
Totally. This segment is buy, sell, hold. I'm going to ask you about a bunch of predicted markets, and you tell me if you would buy those, if you think the probability is higher, sell them if you think it's lower, and hold if you think it's accurate.
Sure.
We'll start with which office will AOC announce a run for by the end of 2027? Right now, it's like close to 50-50.
Yeah.
Senate's 50 cents, president's 43.
So I thought about this a decent amount. I'm going to pick president because if I were her, I think there's a lot more upside in running that, even if you lose, right? Because let's say that if she runs for Senate, she should win that seat. In fact, I would be surprised if Chuck even tried the primary.
Agreed.
Right? So, however, when you're already as famous as her, is being a senator really that much of an increase, of an improvement? I don't think it's that big of an upgrade. Like, I worked in the U.S. Senate, and it's better than being in the House, but it's not so much better. Whereas, do I think she'll win the presidency? Probably not, but
big field.
It's a big field. And if there's 20 candidates and you're the only true progressive and you're winning with a plurality of votes, you could win those first couple of primaries pretty easily. In fact, in 2020, until COVID, Bernie was winning all the primaries. So when COVID hit, like, that guy can't be in charge. And we put in a guy who instead was senile, but nonetheless.
No, but the lane was more filled in 2020. It had Elizabeth Warren to fight with.
Right. No,
AOC
here
won't have that.
I don't think so. Or there might be one or two fringe progressives. But agreed. Lower profile. She would have a hard time winning the general election. But if it's Vance, it's certainly not impossible. But let's just analyze this for her on the question of, you're gonna lose. You'd win the Senate, you'd lose the presidency.
Right.
What should you do? I would still tell her to do the presidency because she'll do really well. That will elevate her. Some people lose elections, but still win because of the type of race they ran and the way, the coverage that they got. And then if she's
Pete Buttigieg is a good one too.
Yeah, for sure. But I think she'll do even better than that, right?
Yeah.
And if she wanted to run for the Gillibrand seat 2 years later or whatever it is, she could certainly do that. And she can go be a host on whatever. She can, for a host, create her own YouTube show and podcast, and she can make $50 million a year. And if she's so against money, she can give it all to the government in the form of taxes if she wants. But nonetheless, if I were her, I'd run for president.
Yeah, it does seem she enjoys Congress and the wheeling and dealing a little bit, but it's an interesting take that even if you knew she was going to lose president,
that's what I would do if I were her. Yeah, she does. To be clear, given that I'm seen, I think, by her as sort of the evil Uber guy who's
sure.
I don't think she'd ever ask my opinion, but that would be it.
All right, so let's move on to New York 12. That's Jerry Nadler's seat, which is most of Manhattan.
Correct.
We've got Michael Lasher at 59 cents, Alex Boris at 23 cents, and then again another clown.
Mike, let me just Micah's a close friend of mine.
Okay,
right.
Great.
I do think he's going to win. And I talked to him this morning. But Alex, it's funny. You have two of the best assembly members in New York running against each other, which is such a shame because you could argue two things. One, we'd be better off having each of them in the congressional delegation. Or, and I made this case to each of them, which is we're better off as a state with them in Albany, where they can have an outsized impact on legislation and policy, whereas in Congress, which is totally based on seniority, there are these two super junior members that really can't do much. Now, I know that AOC, but I love both of these guys. neither of them are AOC, right? So like, I actually think in a weird way, the sports concept, war wins above replacement.
Of course,
right?
yeah, wins above replacement.
I've been working in my head on this notion of a non-sports version of war.
Mm-hmm.
And the case that I made to Micah and a little bit to Alex as well was your war is higher in Albany. Because in Albany, you are so much more talented than the average member of the state assembly that you have the ability to really do big things.
Yeah.
In Congress, one, everyone's mostly pretty reasonably smart and talented because they have to get there. It's not easy to get there. And then two, it's such a stratified structure that your ability to have an impact is relatively limited, especially in that district. So my brother-in-law is a guy named Josh Gottheimer. Josh is a congressman from New Jersey. And Josh has been effective in a short period, in about 10-year period, but because he took the seat from a 6-term Republican, he doesn't have to really he has to win the general election. He's one of the few swing districts. So as a result, the country. So as a result, Josh can kind of vote with Republicans if he wants to. He can do all kinds of stuff because he doesn't have to worry as much about a far left base. New York 12 is as liberal as it gets.
Yep.
So as a result, whether it's Micah or Alex or any other 18 people running, they're all going to vote 100% the same way on every single thing. Now, I think Micah is an unbelievably smart, hardworking, decent, honest, compassionate person who will be a great representative of the district, and that's why I'm excited to be for him. But I think that, their war for both of them is actually a lot higher.
But you think...
But I'll bet Micah for the race.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so 59 cents. It's a good buy there. No, I mean, you're pitching war in a singular season, and they're thinking, well, my career war will be higher if I get...
I'm not sure that's true.
No.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's very easy to get lost in the House for a long time.
It's definitely true.
So, having worked in city, state, and federal government, like to me, forget about running for office, when young people say like, oh, should I go work on the Hill for a few years? I'm like, look, if you just want an interesting life experience where it's kind of fun and you work hard and there's a lot of people your age, sure. But it's kabuki theater.
Yeah.
You're not going to accomplish anything.
Right. You're saying go to Albany. And
if the goal is to actually accomplish, my whole business is regulatory arbitrage, right? The arbitrage, and they're one of the reasons why 80% of our work is focused on state government, is that's where the opportunity to get shit done is.
Very cool. All right. And now moving to New York 7, this is Nadia Velasquez's seat. Who will win that nomination? There's been a lot of, Mamdani endorsed Claire Valdez. Velasquez endorsed Antonio Reynoso.
I'm going to go with Antonio. Antonio's a really good politician. Like, I had him on my podcast a year or two ago, and I was just not my politics, right? They're all going to be too progressive.
Yeah.
But
that's that district.
Yes. But Antonio is a really talented politician, and I think talent, as we saw with the mayor's race, talent wins. Talent and hard work combined.
Very interesting. And I'm curious. So, by the way, buy 20 cents right now, Antonio Reynoso on Predicted. So,
yeah,
very, very easy buy there.
My bet.
So, I now want to ask you, we don't have a market up right now, but we will at some point. Governor Hochul's reelection margin of victory.
Yes.
Over, under 7 points.
So that you set the line really well, right? Yes, so she beat Zeldin by 5. But I think she's had a really good term. And I think that in a world where everything is so flimsy and so just emotional, to have a solid, thoughtful, hardworking person, I think New Yorkers appreciate that about her. I wrote my Substack a couple months ago, where basically saying that her superpower is being regular. It's funny because you would think that Politics 101 is talk to your constituents, understand what they care about, and then try to effectuate the things that matter to them through policy and legislation.
Agreed.
She does that really well. And the vast majority of politicians don't. Either they tell you what you should think, or they just repeat talking points back at you, or whatever it is. Or even if they act like they heard you, they don't do anything about it, right? So I think that she has a lot of hidden strength. With that said, Blakeman's a much tougher opponent than Stefanik would have been. So,
you think so?
I do.
The general wisdom was the opposite.
I disagree with that.
Interesting.
I think that Nassau County is a much better stronghold than Stephanic's district upstate, number one.
Sure.
Number two, I think Blakeman looks the part. And I think that, women still struggle. My AOC point before, notwithstanding, because she's an outlier.
Yeah.
Female candidates still struggle proportionate to the percentage of the voting, right? Like women voted a higher percentage than men, which would imply that female candidates would do better. And that's not really what the math shows. And so there is still some latent sexism in voting. And so I think that helps Blakeman too. So, I'm going to bet over because I'm a Hochul fan overall. In fact,
and the environment, right? You think the environment?
Yeah, I think the turnout is just going to be crazy. Like in some ways, part of the reason Mondani won is it was the first chance for New York City voters to just express themselves, right? And even though city government, there's not that much overlap in reality, it was an expression of that. And then I think for the midterms, obviously Congress is very much relevant to Trump. And I think that Hochul will pick up a lot that way too. And then there are lots of variables, right? So like, what are the job numbers based on AI displacement, right? I think people's energy bills are starting to skyrocket because of the data center negative externalities. Tariffs, we're starting to see more and more consumer prices increase. One of the reasons that I think inflation was lower than maybe you would have expected in 25 relative to the tariffs was that businesses had a lot of inventory and they absorbed the hit. And that inventory is now mainly been worked through. And as a result, the new stuff is going to be taxed, right? And that's going to pass along. So if you're paying more for your groceries and more for your energy bills, and you're worried about your job, I think that is not a great place to be if you're the incumbent party.
Let's extrapolate that out to 2028. I want to ask you about the Democratic nominee field. Right now, Gavin Newsom's at about 31 cents on PredictIt. Are you interested in that buy?
Yeah, potentially. So I have a view that the way that we nominate presidential candidates is totally wrong. Meaning, forget about where the primaries are on the dates. You can discuss that. I just mean that, let's just take the Democrats as the example. The people in the Democratic Party tend to be highly educated people who have never worked in the private sector and kind of live in a world of policy and ideas, and they work in government, and they work in nonprofits, and they work at think tanks, and they think that whatever they think, because they think that the only intelligence that matters, first of all, is academic. They think that academic pedigree is everything. And these are people who...
And this is the Democratic base, like the primary base.
This is the leaders of the party itself. This is the DNC, right? And they construct the primary process to appeal to them. And what it doesn't do is appeal to the actual voter. And you know who wins the election? It's not the best resume. It's the person who resonates the best with the average voter. So if you look at modern American political history, so let's call it since 1980, the vast majority of who won were no way the best qualified candidate. They were a rock star. Ronald Reagan was a rock star. Bill Clinton was a rock star. W, at least relative to Gore, was a rock star. Obama was very much a rock star. Trump in his own crazy way is a rock star, right? In fact, the two presidents that were truly qualified were Biden and HW. They were one-term presidents.
Yes.
Right? And yet the way the Democrats pick their person is based on, the Republicans to a certain extent too, well, who appeals most to the person that lives inside the Beltway and works at a think tank, right? And like, that's the worst way to find the rock star. Like, I would redo the whole process and say, forget all of the debates and all the nonsense events that you guys do that are totally scripted and fake. Let's test them in reality. Have them go to Busch Stadium and call an inning of the Cardinals game on KMOX. Have them show up at the Mall of America, and let's see who comes.
And Joe Rogan, you're interested in that kind of...
Well, for sure. That was so incredibly stupid that Harris went Rogan. Or, put them in a Waffle House at midnight, and let's see how they do with the cops and the truckers and the college kids, right? So, like, that's how you know who resonates and who doesn't, and that's how we should choose the person, which is partly why I was somewhat bullish on AOC, because I think she'll do really well in those types of settings, right?
All those, yeah.
And she'll do fine in debates too, but I think... So,
Is Newsom the rock star, though? I guess to get back to the question.
It's interesting. So Gavin either absolutely is right or absolutely wrong. It's sort of this weird binary question we don't know the answer to yet, right? Which is he's very good looking. He certainly has charisma.
Yeah.
There's two ways to look at it. It might just work for people, and he's the governor of the biggest state in America, so clearly he's doing something right.
Right.
Or it might be this guy is a Hollywood phony, politician phony. He looks too good. His smile's too white. His hair is too slick, and they reject him. I don't know which the answer is.
Yeah, it's 100 or 0.
Right. So if you believe that the answer is it does resonate, then I think he's the nominee, right? If the answer is people find it phony and they reject it, then he's not going to get past Iowa. I don't know. Okay. That's how I analyze it.
Are there any rock stars in that primary field?
It's trick. No, not yet. You have a lot of highly competent or seemingly competent Midwestern governor types like Whitmer and Shapiro, Bashir,
Pritzker.
I'm not as big of a JB fan, but nonetheless, there's plenty of talented people who might be good presidents, by the way, but they're pretty milquetoast, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned Rahm earlier in this. Rahm's an asshole, right? And I don't mind saying
That's
that.
His brand.
Yeah, I'll gladly say that on the record. Rahm is an asshole. If the Democratic Party decides we need our asshole, that could work. I wouldn't probably bet on predicted on Rahm, but it could work, right? So I think you have to find who is the person that transcends traditional politics, and which of those, who do you think actually that their shtick or it's not a shtick, that it actually resonates. Yeah. And to me, of the three people in the mix right now, it's Newsom, Rahm, and AOC.
Any non-politicians?
There's always
Jon Stewart and LeBron James or Mark Cuban. I don't know.
There's always this dream of all these different potential people, right? I think that most of the time, voters are somewhat wary of picking. Like, if Trump had only been a reality TV host and hadn't also been mainly a failed businessman, but still a businessman, I think that he would not have won that nomination. So arguably someone like Mark Cuban as a reality TV host and a truly successful businessman might. But again, he's just sort of like, all the pontification doesn't matter until they're in the arena.
You're doing it. Yeah, that's so true. Okay, two quick ones that I can get for you. So JD Vance right now is at 51 cents. Do you think that's accurate? Buy, sell, hold?
Yeah, it's accurate. Okay. I would hold.
And then related somewhat, I've been asking everyone about this. Right now, our will Trump leave office early market, the yes is at 45 cents. So this is, will he be president on January 19th, 2029? It's now at 45 cents.
And this could be either through health
any means, health, 25th Amendment, stepping down, impeachment, all the above.
I would bet the other side of that one, because if you look at his cabinet appointments, I think they were made with the 25th Amendment in mind specifically, right? I think he appointed people who literally, let's say ICE at his direction kills not 2 people, but 100, they're still not voting for removal, right? Even if Trump's out there being like, kill more, they still will support him. So I don't think it's 25th Amendment. I don't think his ego or his personality would ever let him step down from the most powerful job in the world. And by the way, the most lucrative job in the way he's doing it. And so then you're just betting on, would he die before the term ends?
Right.
I'm not his doctor. I have no idea. But I will say he has a virility that seems pretty solid. I'm not a fan of his in the slightest, but definitely. For a man his age, you got to give him some credit.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.